was a probation officer.
Oh.
Okay, so I work with people when they're released from prison, or when people are going through the court systems, and the court wants a report on them. And sometimes in England, if somebody goes to court for a crime, they don't always go to prison. Sometimes they get a community service.
Yeah.
So it allows them to stay with their families, allows them to stay in their jobs if they've got a job, but this still means that somebody's looking at them for 1, 2 or 3 years. And
So you're the person who's...
the probation officer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would be the person that they report to. And then some prisoners, when they're released from prison, they come out on a licence period of 12 months, or sometimes some prisoners come out and they're on licence for 10 years. If anybody's been involved in a murder or a serious crime, they're on licence for 10 years. And some of the most serious offenders, they're on life licences. They will have to report to the probation service until the day they die. Sometimes they've served a sentence, and then if they behave well in prison, after they've served about half of their sentence, they can be released early.
Okay.
But if they misbehave whilst they're on a licence, I could, as a probation officer, you can send them straight back to prison.
How do you know if they are not behaving well?
The police tell us. I did recalls when I had to do them. Okay. And sometimes I might argue against a recall. I might say, okay, what we'll do is we'll see this person, instead of seeing them once a week, we'll see them 4 times a week. We'll make them come in every other day.
Come to your office.
Come to the office. And then we would graduate that back down until we got them back to once a week or maybe once a fortnight when they'd see us.
What do you do when you see them?
I inquire about, is their accommodation the same? Is their work the same? Is there any change in their health? If they've previously used drugs, we might get them tested to see whether they're still using drugs. If they're doing any vocational training, any training to develop their skills, we ask them how that's going. Because sometimes we'll put them into a company for 2 or 4 weeks to see if they can train up to be skilled enough for that company to take them on. We're very good at that, very successful at that, getting people retrained. Because if you can meet people's needs, basic needs of, have they got somewhere to sleep? Have they got somewhere generating income legitimately? Can you give them a social life? Okay, so they're not isolated, so they're not on their own just thinking about themselves. But if you can help them develop a social life, maybe introduce them to an adult football club, for amateurs, or we've done other things, kind of hobby type clubs, introducing people into classes where they can learn hand skills, etc. So you just encourage people to improve their situation, and we've done all kinds of things. I had a guy that I was totally frustrated with. Okay, and I've been working for him about 7 months and got absolutely nowhere with him. Okay, and he was being released from prison, so he was on licence for about 2 years. And one day I just put my head on the desk, I just went down like this and said, what can we do for you? What can we possibly change that's going to help you? And he said to me, well, I've always been interested in doing something about music. I said, okay. I said, have you written any stuff? And he said, oh, I've got a video on YouTube. So he showed me this video on YouTube, and it was quite good. And he'd done a rap, and it was quite good. Wasn't quite good enough, but it was quite good, and it needed to be expanded. And he got a real story. He'd had a real tough life, and so some of his rap was about his tough life. But he'd lost some friends to knife crime, and he'd written a rap about anti-knife crime. And this man had led the life, he'd been a villain. But he turned around, he was so sad at losing these people who'd been stabbed to death that he wanted to do something. And so we helped him. I knew some people, some good music people, some very good music people actually, and we got them in and we sat around the table and we just listened to him and we threw ideas around and stuff, and we just kind of pointed him in the right direction, and we managed to introduce him to a group that works with ex-offenders, that although he was older than their age group that they work with, they were prepared to try and see how they could get on with him. And there was some fundraising done, and they managed to get him a piece of kit for singing in the street, so he could busk. So he'd got 3 songs that he'd written, that's all he'd got, but he was busking and people were giving him money. And so he was going to Loughborough and he was going to Nottingham on the train. This thing he'd got, this amplifier was on wheels and stuff, and he just got more and more confident. And we got him out of the night shelter. That's pretty grim. Some of the accommodation for people who, when they're released from prison, is pretty tough. It's at least it's there. The councils are trying and stuff, but we managed to get him out of that, and we managed to get him into some other accommodation. And he was doing his busking. He was doing well. He was staying clean, so he wasn't using heavy drugs. Might have been using a bit of cannabis, but he wasn't using heavy drugs. Wasn't using heroin. Because when he came into the office, he was calm.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going da 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 da. You know, he was calm and he was relaxed, and he was getting really excited about his music, and he was volunteering himself to go around to schools, to talk to kids about don't use knives, etc., etc. Talking about his friends who died and stuff, talking about prison because he'd been to prison. And people forget that. They forget that we have responsibilities. And that's the thing that irks me, because it would appear that our society is getting more and more selfish. Capitalism has got a hold of it very tightly. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a communist. I don't know, well, I'm a committed Christian, that's what I am, okay. But I care for the world. But capitalism has driven us so far that it's pure consumerism, and it's unsustainable. It's really, really unsustainable, and that's why we have global warming, and we have population difficulties and stuff. And so, it's great telling our children you have rights, but we also must tell them that they have responsibilities. I don't know how we do that, but
Through education.
well, education, but it has to come from the family.
Parenting, yes.
Yeah, it's the most important job in this life is parenthood. Not everybody wants to do it, and they shouldn't be forced to be parents if they don't want to be a parent. That's understandable. Some children have grown up in dreadful circumstances and are terrified that as they get to be adults that they would have that responsibility. Well, if they want to be single and celibate, that's just fine.